Broncos country, I got a fun one for y'all today, man. We are going to take a trip down nightmare lane and rank all of the quarterbacks in order from worst to first, in between the Peyton Manning and Bo Nix era. There is 13 of them. It is a lot more difficult than you think. So hopefully I'm not ruining you guys' day by bringing you back to this historically bad time in Denver Broncos history. But we're going to go down. We're going to talk about it. And I think it's going to make you guys feel even more grateful and more happy that we have Mr. Bo Nix as our franchise quarterback moving forward. So, guys, if you love Denver sports, if you're a big fan of the Nuggets, the Avs, and the Broncos, I'd appreciate it. If you check the other videos, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe. Hit me up in the comments, man, and interact with me. I love that as well. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. And we are going to start off with number 13. And yes, there were 13 starting quarterbacks that we had in this terrible time between winning Super Bowl 50 and the 2024 draft before we took Bo Nix. So 10 seasons, 9 years, pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So let's get into it. So obviously number 13, we got to put Kendall Hinton here, man. Obviously an extremely unfair situation that he was in with the stupid COVID rules and all that. We couldn't start any of the quarterbacks that we had on the roster. So we had to go with Kendall Hinton. It was technically Philip Lindsay because he was the quarterback for the first snap of the game, but I'm not going to include him in here. It was Kendall Hinton / Philip Lindsay is what you see officially, but I'm going to give it to Kendall Hinton. He hasn't played quarterback since his Wake Forest days, many years prior, and he didn't even play that much before he ultimately transitioned to be a wide receiver in the NFL. Now, you got to think about it like this. That's essentially like saying we're going to have R.J. Harvey be the starting quarterback for the Broncos. That would be pretty crazy. So that was a wild time, man, not just in the world, but in the NFL. It was a miserable game to watch. He ultimately had 13 passing yards. I think he completed 2 passes, and he had 2 picks. And we got absolutely blown out by Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints at the time. So you got to put Kendall Hinton there because really he's not really a quarterback. Number 12, man, is the worst actual quarterback I've ever watched play football in the history of the NFL for any team, for any league. And it was very unfortunate that he happened to be a first-round pick of the Denver Broncos. That is Paxton Lynch. You know about the Paxton Lynch smear campaign that Denver Sports has on 104.3 The Fan. And we've had our own little smear campaign here amongst the, smaller, very small Denver YouTube media community. Paxton Lynch was awful. Dog shit in every sense of the word. He was just not good, man. The guy preferred to play video games rather than study. He was unbelievably immature. Just not very bright as a person and as a football player. You look at the stats, he had 4 starts. He was a 1-3 record, 622 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 picks. He ended up with a passer rating of 72.7. But just look at the eyeball test, man. The guy was terrible. He was awful in camp. He couldn't beat anybody out ever. And I think it was one of the big reasons why Gary Kubiak decided to call it quits and retire just 1 season after the 2015 Super Bowl win, because he was being forced by ownership and by, that wasn't really the ownership, it was the trust, ultimately by John Elway, to play him over Trevor Siemian, who was a significantly better option. And that led to just kind of an ugly relationship for a little bit between the two of them. So Paxton Lynch is very much deserving to be number 12. Why is he number 13? Well, you can't put him behind somebody that, wasn't a quarterback. Kendall Hinton was absolutely miserable too. So it's kind of a wash. But of all the quarterbacks listed, by far and away the worst. So grateful that I'd never have to look at his pirate face anymore. And, yeah, he was just terrible, man. There's no other way around it. Number 11 is Jeff Driscoll. This is such a bad list, man. It really is. But Jeff Driscoll, he really played just 1 game for us. Didn't look very good. He was never really good in camp. He was just kind of a backup player for most of his career before he ultimately fizzled out. But in the 1 game, he basically did nothing. 176 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Like I said, a 71.0 rating. Really, the next, 3 guys are all kind of clubbed into the same tier, I would say. They were all backups. They got a couple, starts under their belt, but Jeff Driscoll was awful, man. And he was awful for the entirety of his career. And keep in mind, guys, these rankings are strictly for their time and their tenure with the Denver Broncos. But Jeff Driscoll, not only was he bad in the one start that he had, he ended up ultimately getting replaced as a backup pretty quickly as well in a miserable quarterback room and a quarterback era for the Denver Broncos, which leads us to number 10. Number 10 was Brandon Allen. I ranked him ahead of Driscoll because he showed a little bit more flashes. Obviously, he played in a couple more games. He was 1-2 in those games. The one that really stands out to me is they had a game where we started against the Minnesota Vikings. He had a killer first half. He was on fire. We were winning by like 21 points. We ultimately ended up giving up the lead and lost the game. But Brandon Allen showed a little bit more potential and juice. I think he's still playing in the NFL now. So I missed the L on the last name, so my bad. I know it's Allen, but Brandon Allen was not good in his tenure here. The only thing that I really liked about Brandon Allen was the fact that he wore number 2, since that is my favorite number. But otherwise, he was really nothing special. 500 yards in the 3 games, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 68.3 rating. Remember him just holding on to the ball way too much. Just didn't really seem like he really knew and understand what he was doing. So we moved on from him fairly shortly after the 3 games that he started with us. Spent a couple seasons here. And that brings us to the number 9 quarterback, and that is Brett Ripen. I got a soft spot in my heart for Brett Ripen. Brett Ripen also played 3 games. He went 2-1 in those games. 664 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have 5 picks. So he showed some ugliness to him. But the reason I ranked him above Brandon Allen is because he was someone that the Broncos he kept doing the little things to be able to earn a roster spot year in and year out for several seasons here with Denver being the backup. Always a really good teammate, somebody that they talked about being very smart. You can tell that he was very smart when he was playing. And in a couple blowout games or in a couple, late season games, he took a little bit more chances, but he's got the quarterback bloodlines with his uncle Mark Ripen playing in the NFL for a little bit. And I think he's someone that's got a future in this league as a coach. Someone they talked about consistently was very, very bright, and obviously was put in very terrible positions, like most of these quarterbacks were. But I think just the fact that he was able to hang around a little bit more, as a backup here in Denver, after being a 7th round pick, you got to give him his flowers there. And I remember he impressed. I remember he was in camp with, I don't know if it was with Case Keenum or it might have been with Siemian. The year that they took him, I can't remember if it was the year before Siemian or after, but it was a competition with Siemian and Paxton Lynch and Brett Ripen, or maybe it was somebody else. But whatever the competition was, it was so bad and it was so many years, everything kind of just flows over each other. And I don't really have a full memory of it. Probably should have looked into it a little bit more. But I remember he was a part of a competition, and even though he was never really going to be considered the starter, he looked consistently better than a lot of the guys that he was going up against in practice, but he never ended up, ultimately panning out. I think it was the year where we had Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. He was just kind of there doing his own little thing as well. So number 9 we are putting with Brett Ripen, and this is where it starts to maybe get a little bit controversial, or maybe you guys' rankings I think will differ quite a bit. So we'll get into that. Number 8 is Brock Osweiler. Now, this one was tough for me because Brock Osweiler had a really, really big part into us ultimately winning Super Bowl 50. I think he still doesn't get enough credit for it. He was really solid in 2015, stepping in for an injured Peyton Manning. He came in, he played well in games, got us some big victories at specific times that we needed him. He ultimately decided to not sign with us. He left to go to Houston. Then he got traded from Houston to the Browns, and then the Browns received I think a 2nd round pick just to take him off of the books in Houston. He ends up getting cut from the Cleveland Browns and ends up making a little bit of a return here before I think he ends up retiring, or he might have had one more stop. But in that time where he came here after the Manning era, he was awful. He was really, really bad. He looked nothing like like himself from previous. Obviously, it was a terrible situation as a whole, but he did end up going, I think, 0-4 in the 4 starts that he played. 2,600 yards in his career, not in those 4 games, with 12 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. But when you're looking at those 4 games, it was not pretty at all when you look at it. And I'm actually going to pull up, because the stats that I had here was for him for his career. Oops. But Brock Osweiler, when he was here in his second stint, let's pull this up. Oh yeah, he ended up spending a season in Miami before he left. He had, in the 4 games that he had started, he had a 55.8 completion percentage, just over 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He did have a rushing touchdown as well, but lost a couple fumbles, and he just was not playing well at all. He played a little bit better the following year in Miami, but still, it was a bad stint when he was here, but definitely better than the guys previous to him. Moving up to number 7 is Jarrett Stidham. Obviously, he's still our current backup. He played, a few games as a starter here with Denver. The big thing with Stiddy, and the reason that I have him a little bit higher, he hasn't really gotten a chance to play a lot, but he's always been somebody that, impressed Sean Payton quite a bit. Obviously, enough to give him a pretty decent backup quarterback salary originally, and then re-signed him again this offseason because he had seen something in him to where if he needed to step in, he would be able to do so. He went 1-1 in the 2 starts that he had here in Denver, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Didn't look terrible, didn't look great. But the thing that was really eye-opening is that the offense under Russell Wilson did not look any different than it did with Jarrett Stidham. And that should kind of say something, right? Because yes, Russell Wilson's tenure here was really bad. There's no doubt about it. But it didn't really look much different or much worse with Stidham. Obviously, Russell Wilson has a history of being, an elite quarterback, Pro Bowl level, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That changed dramatically. We all know the story once he came here in Denver. But to say that the Russell Wilson that you had seen in the last season here as Denver and Jarrett Stidham were basically a wash, I think warranted him to be at least ranked in this area. I think if he played a couple more games, he probably would have been a little bit higher because you do see some of the tools with him. But yeah, it hasn't been all that special with him. But I think he's a solid backup. I love having him in the room. Him and Bo Nix are currently very, very close, which is always a good thing. Number 5 is we are going to put Joe Flacco. Now, I really went back and forth between putting Flacco and the guy that I put in number 5, flip-flopping the two. And I ultimately decided to go with this, with Joe Flacco here. Here's the thing about Flacco. Now, he was obviously put in a terrible, terrible position while he was here in Denver because he proved after he had left here, even though, he was, a lot of people felt like he was washed. I felt like he was obviously on a downward trajectory in his career, but he had a lot of seasons. He had several seasons after leaving here in 2019. He's still playing, which is crazy as a 40-year-old, where he was a lot better, quite a bit better than he was when he was here. His time here was, yes, it was a mix of having a really bad team around him, but he also just didn't play all that well. Also, he took a lot of big shots. He was holding onto the ball quite a bit. He played in just 8 games. They went 2-6 in the 8 games with him before he left with a back injury because he was just getting absolutely hounded. But he was a huge disappointment. Was not nearly the upgrade that people thought that he would be over Keenum, and it was just ugly. The reason that I always liked Joe Flacco is because he was like, man, we're a 2-5 football team. Why the hell are we punting the ball? That whole post-game comment. I like that about him because there was no one else. That was such a bad time in Broncos era, like in Broncos history. It was just so dark and ugly and terrible, and there's really no words to describe how terrible it was. And he just came in here and he finally showed like a little bit of being real. So I definitely appreciated that of him. But yeah, he was really not that good in his tenure here at all. Do I think that he's a better quarterback than ultimately my number 5 guy in Drew Lock? Yes. The reason I have Drew Lock over Joe Flacco is because Drew Lock in his time here, he showed a lot of promise, especially in his first full year as a starter under, I can't even think about the name of the coordinator. He ended up leaving here. He got fired, which is a little bit of a surprise. And then he ended up being like an assistant, and now he was offensive coordinator for like Kentucky or something. Oh man, what was his name? It's gonna drive me crazy. Anyways, he didn't end up being a really good coach at all, but he called a really good offense. Scagliano, what was his name? Scott. I can't remember. It's gonna drive me crazy, and you guys are probably shouting at the screen now. Let me know who it was. But let me go back and see if I can find any of it. But regardless, in that season, he actually played super well. I thought he showed a lot of promise. He went 4-1 in his first season as a rookie. You know, most franchise wins by a rookie quarterback with 4 at the time, which is really funny to think about. And you know, he showed a lot of that grit. You know, he definitely had a lot of, you know, street ball to him. You know, a little bit like of crazy kind of just erotic play. But to his credit, he played well in right systems. And I think if he had really good coaching, I think if he was someone that had a coordinator that built around a skill set that was able to build the team around him, I think he could have shown a little bit. But a lot of immaturity to his game as well. And just making really dumb plays at bad times. But you know, just like I said, I think he was a very young quarterback overall, and immature player, and he probably needed a little bit more seasoning. I do still believe that we might have given up on Drew Lock a little bit too much, but you saw some of the flashes. You really, really did in his time here. And, you know, he ended up playing in 21 games for the Broncos, and he went 8-13 in those 21 games. So not all that good. But I mean, shoot, in the 2020 season, he had, you know, 16 touchdowns, 15 picks. In his entire career, he had 25 touchdowns with 20 interceptions. So a decent rating, you know, a quarterback rating of, you know, 84, which is not all that bad. And then you add in 3 more rushing touchdowns. He did have his moments, man. He had those flashes, but he also had really, really bad plays at very inopportune times that ultimately, I think, overshadowed some of the success that he had. But I do put him over Flacco because I thought his stint here was better, and I felt like he showed some traits to show that you can certainly develop around him a little bit more. And you could even make the argument that he could be above my number 4 guy in Case Keenum. I'm not as low on the Case Keenum era as a lot of people are. I know it got cut a little bit short because of the injuries that he had here, unfortunately. You know, he played through those injuries. But I forgot if it was a knee or an ankle. There was some sort of injury that he had that you could tell bothered him, even though he kept playing through it. And, you know, it led to him just not playing as well down the stretch. But, you know, in the 16 games that he had in 2018 as a starter, he goes 6-10. I believe we started like 3-1 or 3-0 that year. So we got off to a really good start. He had 18 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, really showed a lot of solid football. It was so bad at the time that it was almost kind of refreshing. I remember he had an amazing camp. He was crushing it in training camp. And then things around him started falling apart. The coaching staff, everything was super bad. And the rest kind of was history. So like I said, he had started off really good and started to teeter off after some injuries and stuff. But, you know, still over, you know, 3,800 yards passing as well. 18 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Didn't really turn the ball over that much. He did have a couple of, you know, stupid plays here and there, but I thought overall he was solid. He played exactly like the elite backup level that he is, a player that he is, Case Keenum. So the situation of bringing him in and talking about we think he's in his prime and or he hasn't even hit his prime and all that stuff, it was just all smoke. It was such an ugly time in Broncos history, but when you look back, I didn't really mind what I seen with Case Keenum. So that's why I put him in number 4. He did not quite crack my top 3. But who did was the guy that we traded everything for. We've talked about Russell Wilson. Obviously, everybody knows. So we're not gonna go through all of, you know, the history of all that with Russell Wilson while he was here. But yeah, I mean, an 11-19 record in 2 seasons was not good. You know, the stats will not tell the whole story. He did have a very good statistical year. And overall, he had 42 touchdowns and 19 picks in his time here with Denver, and over 6,500 yards. But given the situation, given the fact that he really couldn't, lead men the way that a lot of people think, I think people started to see through it. He just didn't have an idea of, reading the room. Sometimes it's okay to be critical and criticize yourself and not always try to be optimistic. He never got that. He couldn't complete balls across the middle. He held on to the football way too long. Couldn't really play in rhythm in his time here. Obviously, really bad fit with Sean Payton, but you see where he's at in his career now. He's just not nearly the same player that he was. And I didn't want to knock him lower. Like, I put him at 3 because I genuinely believed that's where he belonged in his time here in Denver. But when you factor in everything that we gave him, and we gave up to get him, and then the contract that we're still having to eat dead money for this season, as a result of, it makes the whole story even worse. But when you look at just his play, he had one awful season, a second season where Sean Payton comes in and tries to right the ship, where he did play better, but not nearly good enough. And the writing was on the wall. You could tell that even though he wasn't horrible in 2023, right? It was not like, there was not really much room for growth, and you just knew you were not going to ever be at a level where you can compete with him as your quarterback and with Sean Payton as your coach. So I put him at number 3 because I think he's deserving of that. And my number 2 guy is Trevor Siemian, man. People forgot because he was the first quarterback to start after the Manning era, but people forgot that Trevor Siemian was actually pretty damn solid for the couple seasons that he played here. Definitely a quarterback that I did not hate. I did not mind watching at all. He had a winning record, the only one in that time frame with a winning record. So, I guess technically not the only one, but he had the best record from a winning percentage standpoint of anyone, going 13-11 in the 24 games. He had 5,500 passing yards, 28 touchdowns to 24 picks, and I thought overall, like I said, he was really solid. Now you do have to factor in you have to factor in that he did have Gary Kubiak as his play caller and his coach for the first season that he was a starter. That's really helpful, and he helped get a lot of them out of it. But in 2016, he went 8-6 in the 14 games. He did get an injury, and we had to put Paxton Lynch in, which we all know how that went, but. He went 8-6. He was able to beat out a first-round pick as a 7th rounder. 18 touchdowns to just 10 interceptions, 3,400 yards. He was solid. I remember I was saying to myself, like, give this guy a little contract extension, right? Nothing crazy, but you can build around him. And I think that probably would have been the path that we took with Siemian, and we could have gotten decent quarterback play from him for a couple more seasons after, if there wasn't the back and forth headbutting between Elway wanting Kubiak to play Paxton Lynch and Kubiak saying, no, I don't want to play Paxton Lynch. So I think if that never happened, he would have ultimately played a little bit more. But even in the second season, he ends up starting in 10 games of the 16, I think it was that year, and he went 5-5. Definitely didn't look nearly as good as he did in 2016 with the new coach and all that, but they ended up benching him. They went with, I believe it was Drew Lock that year. And the rest is history. Man, everything just kind of flows over itself. It's pretty crazy. Or actually, they might have even brought back Brock Osweiler. I think they did after Siemian got hurt. Did they start 3 quarterbacks that year? I think they might have. Anyways, it was an ugly time. It was a very, very ugly time. Yeah, they started Paxton a little bit. And that's when he was crying on the bench. He knew that his time was over. And then they also played Brock Osweiler a little bit as well in the 2017 season. But yeah, I thought overall, man, Siemian showed a lot of really good things. He played a brand of football that you could win with. Didn't turn the ball over a lot. Was really solid. He could read the field. He could deliver passes. He was very accurate in his time here. So it's not really saying much, given how bad it was. But I got Trevor Siemian as the number 2. Which leads us to, in my opinion, who was the best quarterback during the Broncos' nightmare era between Peyton Manning and now Bo Nix, and that is my man Teddy Two Gloves. For whatever reason, I'll always love this dude, man. I really liked this game. I thought he was very underrated and very solid while he was here. Obviously, the couple concussions that he had completely derailed his time while he was here, which was extremely unfortunate. But I thought Teddy Bridgewater was really solid here, man. He went 7-7 as a starter, 18 touchdowns to 7 picks, over 3,000 yards. He looked really good. We got off to a good start again that year, and he was able to play some pretty decent football on a really bad team with Vic Fangio as the coach. I loved his grit. I loved his leadership. I feel like the guys really bought out around him, and I think in a lot of those games he got the most out of the players, given how bad everything around him was. Sure, there was a couple games that he absolutely gave up and made some pretty bad decisions, but there was also some games where I feel like he earned us with the win, and he played really well. And you just saw it. Like, even though he didn't play as much as some of the other guys on this list, like Siemian and Russell Wilson during his tenure here with the Broncos, you just saw something different. You saw a quarterback that could be very accurate, that can play in rhythm, that could extend a little bit with his legs if he needed to, that showed some of those leadership traits. And, very similar to what you've seen for the entirety of his career. So I don't think there's really any doubt about it. Teddy Bridgewater was the best quarterback in that era. Again, that's not really saying very much, but I will give him that. I am a big fan of Teddy Bridgewater, and I liked what I saw in his time here. But it was a miserable time. You guys are probably going to have your own thoughts and your own opinions on what player and how you would change the rankings. I'd love to know you guys' thoughts below. But I definitely kind of enjoyed this, man, because it made me really appreciative of where the Broncos stand currently in 2025. All right, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Y'all take it easy, man. And until the next video, go Broncos, and peace out.